You're listening to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Imagine that you're deep in a dungeon. Your party has just faced a basilisk. You watched powerless as your character's closest companion, their best friend, someone they've fought alongside for months, was turned to stone in front of their eyes. The battle is over. The dice are put away, and you're ready to go home from the session. But here's the question I'm posing today. What happens to the characters who witness this event? Do they mourn? Do they push it aside? Do they crack a joke to lighten the mood, or do they pretend it never happened? Today, we're delving into a psychological lens on role-playing that is called defense mechanisms. These are unconscious psychological strategies that people, and if you play them right, even your characters, can use to cope with stress, anxiety, and trauma. By weaving them into your characters or your campaigns, you can move beyond the flat, my character is sad, and create more realistic, emotionally complex stories that resonate on a much deeper level. Our goal today is to explore 4 of the most classic defense mechanisms from psychology and show how they can shape your roleplay and enrich your table's storytelling, giving both the DMs and players powerful tools to use in this narrative. I'm Robert Walker, author of Session Zero, the DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in Any System, and this is my show where I teach collaborative storytellers how to have more immersive campaigns using psychology. So let's start with a little bit of Psychology 101. What are defense mechanisms? Well, they were first introduced by Sigmund Freud and later expanded by his daughter, Anna Freud. At their core, they are unconscious psychological strategies that protect us from anxiety or stress or internal conflict. And here's the key. They're not inherently bad. They're survival tools. Sometimes they keep us functional when reality is overwhelming and we can't face it head on. They're our defense. Think of them like a warrior shield or a suit of armor. They don't make a threat disappear, but they can buy you time or give you a semblance of safety to buy our psyche some space to survive and keep moving. And if there's any group of people that needs a psychological shield or a suit of armor, it's adventurers. I mean, think of it. Their world is soaked in trauma. So if we set that stage, there's a lot of common themes that a character might face in a typical D&D campaign that would be considered quote-unquote trauma. They often witness gruesome deaths. They might fail to save an innocent person, or maybe fail to save an entire town. They might have to, as the plot twist unfolds, be faced with the task of hunting down or even destroying a former friend or an ally. They might have to deal with the complications of committing an act against their own moral code, such as torture or theft or betrayal, or in the case of a paladin, maybe even lying is against their code. And there are many times their characters survive near-death experiences. Think of the near TPKs being narrowly avoided by some heroic sacrifice or lucky roll of the die. In our real world, we would recommend these people to therapy. We'd find them support systems and encourage them to take time to heal. But for our adventurers, there's no therapy office in Waterdeep. I don't know, maybe some of you have included that in your games, but generally it's not something we discuss at our table. There's no group trauma session that they go to deal with all of these difficult emotions. The next quest is already awaiting them. That's where these unconscious defense mechanisms can come in. They can be the mind's way of saying, I can't deal with this right now. I still have to keep moving. So let's look at the 4 defense mechanisms that I wanted to focus on today. What do they mean psychologically, and how can they show up in roleplay so that DMs and players can weave them into the narrative? First, let's talk about repression. In psychology, repression is when we push painful thoughts or feelings or memories so deep into our conscious that we're not even really aware of them anymore. They're buried, but they're not gone. So, a role playing example of this might be a paladin whose squire died because of a mistake that the paladin had made. In their conscious mind, they might have no memory of that earlier failure. They role play as the perfect, virtuous knight, but every time they see a young squire or pass the place where it happened, something inside them might stir, maybe an unexplained anger or a flash of unease that they just can't put their finger on. And a DM's role in this could be playing with those buried triggers, introducing an NPC who could remember the lost squire or look like the lost squire, or place an object tied to the memory in a treasure hoard, describing possible phantom flashes of recognition that the paladin might be having. It can create a really powerful drama without the player needing to break the character, because this repression is not about remembering. You're using this repression as a storytelling tool for both the player and the DM. Next, there's denial. Denial is a refusal to accept reality because it's too painful. Unlike repression, denial's often conscious. The person knows what happened, but insists that it can't be true. So an example of this could be the party might watch a dragon incinerate a village, or the fighter after this, and then the fighter after this crosses their arms and says something like, no, that was just an illusion. Dragon wouldn't really do that. We'll find the real culprit. And they might be actively avoiding or rewriting the reality that just took place in front of them. For a DM, this denial could be an opportunity for tension. You can pile on evidence or introduce NPCs that might be saying you can't run from what you saw, or create situations where the denial could put the party at risk. It can be dramatic, it can be frustrating, it can even be darkly funny, but it is always going to reveal a little bit of something of the character's psyche, and that makes the character feel so much more real. Next, we have rationalization. So rationalization is the art of making excuses, creating logical explanations for behavior that actually stem from less acceptable motives. An example of this might be a rogue stealing a priceless artifact from a noble, not because the party needs it, but because they wanted it for themselves. And when they're challenged, they might shrug it off and say that the noble was corrupt. They'd play the Robin Hood side of the story. If I didn't take it, he would have just used it to oppress the poor. So what I'm actually doing is helping people. They're rationalizing that action by redefining it, so to speak. As a DM, you can lean into this by validating or even questioning their excuse. Maybe an NPC praises the rogue as a true hero of the people, pushing the player to double down. Or maybe another NPC cuts through the rationalization, and the guards you stabbed, were they corrupt too, is the line that they might throw out there. Either way, rationalization can provide some really interesting role-play moments, especially in dialogue, because the rationalization process can be really fun to interact with in those like role play settings where you're having dialogue back and forth. And finally, projection. So projection is when we take our own unacceptable feelings and pin them on somebody else. This is passing the blame. It's I'm not angry, you're angry. So a role play example of this might be if a wizard is secretly terrified of the BBEG, instead of admitting their fear, they might turn to the barbarian and say something like, well, you just want to run away, don't you? You're the coward. And displace that fear onto someone else. So this is sort of a gift for inner party drama for the DM. If a player decides to play this sort of projection theme as their defense mechanism, they might have another PC or an NPC call out, why are you accusing me? You're the one asking. Or it can spark sort of an argumentative front at the table, but also offer deep character development moments if the whole group is on board with this. So how do we use these defense mechanisms at the table in a way that can deepen role play without bogging down the story. So for players, I would say use defense mechanisms as a way of showing, not telling your character's inner life. So instead of saying, I'm sad, you could role play denial, projection, or repression and add some texture to your character's realism. You don't need to force it into every session. Just let these moments come up naturally in response to things that the character might find to be traumatic. What would you find to be traumatic if you witnessed it in your real life? And then how would your character deal with that? Sort of use it as a thought experiment to roleplay with. It's also a fantastic way to signal character growth. Maybe your character begins in denial, but later on, after the party has victories, they start to slowly accept reality of what they've had to do or what they've seen. Now, as a dungeon master, using NPCs and settings and encounters as triggers, you can have a familiar object or a phrase or a mirror-like villain that can provoke these mechanisms out in a character. It's really helpful if you've already discussed these defense mechanisms with your party ahead of time. So remember that using these tools, you shouldn't be punishing your characters, your players. They're story enhancers. Use them to create an emotional depth and add dramatic beats to your story. And most importantly, you have to collaborate in this. Defense mechanisms should be used to enrich your game, not derail it. So check in with your players and use safety tools if you're delving into heavier or darker territory. So we looked at these defense mechanisms, repression, denial, rationalization, and projection, and how they can enrich your psychological realism for your characters. These unconscious shields aren't just for our psychology textbooks. You can see now how they can be powerful tools for your storytelling used around your table. When you weave them into your role play, you can create characters that feel more alive, more complex, and more compelling. And I do want to hear from you. Have you ever role played a character who has coped with trauma in a unique way? Have you ever seen denial or projection or rationalization pop up in one of your games? I'd like to have you share your stories with me. I'd love to feature some of these stories in a future episode. So if you are interested, please, you can connect with the show through our link tree. You can send me an email, an audio clip. If you want to, we can even schedule a little bit of time to chat about this, because I would like to talk about this and see some of the ways in which my cyclothids have utilized the tools that have been presented in the show to enrich their own games or their own characters. And I think that would be a really fun way for the community to sort of see how this stuff can really enhance the storytelling sessions. Now let's move on to my final segment, Tricks of the Trade. Okay, so Tricks of the Trade today is just bringing it all together. It's one thing to know about these defense mechanisms, but how you actually use them in play without bogging the game down. We hit on this a little bit earlier, but let's talk about 3 practical tricks that can make your defense mechanisms believable, immersible, and fun. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is to use subtle signals, not big speeches. In real life, defense mechanisms are pretty unconscious ways of dealing with things. People don't announce that I'm repressing my trauma now. Instead, it just leaks through in small, often unconscious behaviors. So show denial by casually brushing off evidence or make a quick joke about something horrific. You can signal repression by changing the subject whenever a sore topic comes up. And you could reveal projection through tone, accusing another player or PC of being scared with extra intensity. As a DM, you could reinforce these signals by having NPCs notice or challenge or mirror the characters, giving the player something to push against. Now, next, you can tie it to your character's goals and flaws. Now, this works because defense mechanisms aren't random. They serve to protect the self and self-interests. And when you link them to a player's backstory or their flaw or their goal, they're going to feel more organic. So a lawful good paladin might rationalize breaking their oath by saying it was for the greater good. Or a chaotic rogue might project their guilt by accusing the party of being too controlling. A wizard who repressed a near death memory might obsessively over prepare spells and never admit why. So, as a DM, just nudge these behaviors during moments of tension. They'll feel like natural extensions of characters rather than forced drama. And finally, let the mask slip over the course of the story. Defense mechanisms are protective, but they're not perfect. Cracks eventually show through, and those cracks can make for very powerful roleplay moments. So start small, denial at first, and then maybe hints of doubt start creeping in, or gradually allowing the character to acknowledge portions of reality, maybe after an NPC challenges them or after repeated evidence continues to build up. And use a slow reveal as a dramatic arc, moving from the unconscious of your character to the conscious choices that they're making. As a DM, you can plan where external events might have opportunity to chip away at the character's defense mechanisms, like peeling back an onion, giving opportunities for each layer to be revealed and a deeper truth to come through. Defense mechanisms in roleplay aren't about psychology lectures at the table. They're about making the characters feel real, using subtle cues, linking them to character goals, and allowing gradual change and possibilities for character growth. By doing all this, you can create these adventurers who are going to feel like people struggling through very tragic and impossible worlds. In a way, just an amplified version of us. So if you'd like to incorporate all of this into your story, I encourage you to do it, and I encourage you to tell me about how it went, and I'm really looking forward to that. So get in touch with me however you wish to. Also, please remember to support this show. There are links in the show notes of all the different ways that you can support the show. Keep it going and keep it growing. I appreciate all of that so much from each and every one of you cyclothids. As always, I'll see you next session.